Tonight on Free Minds TV, we're going to be talking extensively about the war in Iraq because, believe it or not, we are still at war. We're also going to be talking about the possibility of war with Iran, as well as Social Security, why it's pretty much a fraud on America. All that and more when we come back on Free Minds TV. Welcome to Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. I'm Toby.
And I'm Nick.
All right. You know, if you look outside, the birds are chirping, the sun is shining, you would never really think that we're at war. Not like people, at least in World War II, were at war, pinching every penny, having to stand in line, get waivers for gasoline, all sorts of, everybody was sacrificing to be at war. We've now been at war for, I think, longer now than we were at war in World War II and many other wars. We've been at war for many, many years in Iraq, spending much more money than we spent in World War II and in other wars. Billions and billions. I don't know, is it creeping up towards trillions of dollars yet?
If it's not there yet, it's probably getting there.
So spending huge amounts of money, deflating our currency, is pretty much where we're seeing it most. But for the most part, if you're an average American, you're not really sacrificing too much to be at war. For the average person, probably wouldn't even know it. We're largely sheltered from the images that are coming from Iraq. We don't really see many dead American soldiers or many dead Iraqi soldiers or Iraqi citizens. For the most part, we're pretty sheltered, aren't we, Nick?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, compared to wars in the past, like you mentioned, World War II, on the home front, we haven't seen a whole lot of sacrifices. And the casualties, while they've been significant, we haven't been losing, 1,000 men in a day as we did in World War II. And the military forces that we have now are a relatively smaller part of the population. So a lot of people don't personally know somebody who's at war. So I think in a lot of ways, the American public at large hasn't felt the impact as directly. But given that we're not rationing right now and we're not basically paying cash, we're paying by credit card, or we're charging, putting it on our tab basically to pay for this war, we are going to see those bills come due. And I think that has a lot to do with the weakness of the US dollar and the high energy prices we're seeing. If you actually look into the reasons behind those, a lot of it has to do with our currency is being devalued by running up all this debt to pay for the war. So we're not having a free ride, and I think we're starting to see some of those bills coming back to bite us. But really, compared to wars of the past, it hasn't been as much of a burden on the American public this time around.
Right. It's more, it seems to be of a hidden burden, because as you said, it is more on inflation that we've all seen our dollar decrease a little bit. I don't think that the government directly comes out and says that's because we're at war and we're printing money to be at war, trillions of dollars.
Well, they certainly don't want to say that. It wouldn't be very popular to say that our policies are causing.
Right, because while we're at war, we've still had tax cuts, we've had rebates coming in the mail. Well, those rebates were just printing more money to give us those rebates, so that it's eventually going to be taxing us, except in a hidden tax where it's inflation. Inflation usually hitting poor people the hardest, because poor people are the ones who make the least dollars and need those dollars to go the furthest. They need to be able to pay for their gas to get to their work, pay for their rent, pay for food, and those are the things that are seemingly going up higher and higher. The price of living, the price of heating your home, the price of gas, of getting to work, the price of food, a lot of that has to do with the price of gas as well, but we're seeing that we're paying more for these things, and I think that it's creeping up. A lot of this may have to do, I'm not saying all of it, but a lot of this may have to do with the fact that we are at war. So while it may seem, when you're looking outside, you're not making any sacrifices, we all really are.
Yeah. I think it's absolutely true, and the government tends to want to blame the market for the subprime problems and also problems with oil prices. They're blaming it on speculation, and certainly I think you can say that, yeah, there are some influences in the market, but mostly that's just the market trying to react to government policies. Obviously, our presence in the Middle East and a lot of the uncertainty there is driving oil speculation way up, because that's the primary provider of foreign oil is the Middle East. And when you have that amount of uncertainty built into the market, you're obviously going to see prices go up. They have to factor in a risk premium. and supplies aren't coming out of Iraq the way we were told they would, even at this point. So there's been a lot of things that relate directly to government policy, but obviously policymakers don't like to blame themselves for a rough economy.
Right. And I mean, I don't think that we're going to be getting out of this mess anytime soon, no matter which of the two bozos who are running for president. I mean, there's some others, but one of the two that'll probably get elected, McCain or Obama, aren't going to be able to do too much. I mean, they do have different views. McCain says we'll probably stay there for 50 to 100, maybe indefinite amount of years, continual presence in Iraq. Obama saying that he'd start withdrawing troops, but very slowly, would do it over the course of years, possibly not even ruling out the continued presence of military bases and a large force over there. So whoever we're getting elected into the White House now, we're not going to see too much change. We're going to continue to have to pay this debt. Unfortunately, like we were told, we're not going to be getting the money back in gas and oil because, well, we've seen that go up since we went to war. I was thought that we would see a decrease. That's what the American public was told, that if we went to war, we'd be paid back with oil. But we really haven't. We've pretty much the opposite.
Right. It's unintended consequences. And while Senator Obama is probably not going to fix the mess, it appears that military voters who have traditionally voted Republican in elections past by an overwhelming margin. I think the last presidential election, it was a 3-to-1 margin in favor of President Bush. This year, it looks like you're going to see pretty much an even split at the very best for McCain.
You know, that's really interesting because he's the less, Obama is the less war hungry. He's the one who actually does want to start to pull out of Iraq, at least. It's interesting because when we were watching the primary debate, when Ron Paul was the GOP leader, the people who were supporting the military, people in the military, overwhelmingly were turning their support, donating their dollars to Ron Paul, who was completely wanting to pull out of not only Iraq, but all over the world, wanted to shut down our military bases and our military presence everywhere. So it seems that people who are in the military and people who actually do want to support the troops support bringing them back and support a president who doesn't want to go to war for everyone. Because if you're someone who supports the military, chances are you might have someone who's in the military, maybe a brother, a sister, a spouse who's in the military. Now, do you want them to have an internal presence in Iraq, or do you want them at home actually defending America? Do you want them to be going in and starting a new war with Iran, or do you want them at home supporting America here at America? So it kind of makes sense that the less war-hungry presidents would start to be, now that we've seen so many families stretched thin, having their family members overseas, over in Iraq, over in Afghanistan, we're starting to see the tide shifting and the less war-hungry people are getting the votes, which I think is a great thing.
Yeah, and even the former Secretary of, I think it was Secretary of State, Lawrence Korb, he was Secretary of State under President Reagan, he's saying that he's expecting not an overwhelming victory for Senator Obama, but there will be a backing away from the Republican Party within the military vote. And so you're going to see it's going to be a tough sell for McCain. He's talked about there's going to be more wars, and he's clearly very, very hawkish towards Iran, not to mention other countries. It doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of potential military conflicts out there that he backs away from. And since 1973, when we got rid of the draft the last time around and went to the all-volunteer military, the military has traditionally supported Republicans by a very heavy margin, and that's definitely helped the Republicans in elections past. And obviously, even among the general population, you're seeing a backing away from the Republican Party, largely because of foreign policy issues and the war. Americans, by and large, don't seem to want more war, and they're starting to realize that the Republicans are definitely going to give it to them. Unfortunately, I don't think the Democrats are really a peace party.
That's the problem.
Either.
While I'm glad to see that people are backing away from McCain, I don't think that Obama is necessarily the answer at all either. I mean, I would really like to see a presidential candidate who actually stood for freedom and liberty. So whether it's voting for McCain or Obama, you're going to get the same big government either way, unfortunately. But hey, it's good to see that the American public is starting to shift away from war-hungry presidents. Not to say that the government will necessarily be responding. We're going to be going into the Downsizer Dispatch, but when we come back, we're going to be talking a little bit more about what the government's doing, having to do with drumming more drums of war. But for now, let's move on to the Downsizer Dispatch. Nick, what's this week's? What can people do to contact their government, let them know how they feel about certain legislation?
Well, this week's Downsizer Dispatch deals with the FISA warrantless wiretapping bill and the telecom immunity bill, which we've been talking about consistently over the last few weeks. But it's basically an effort to retroactively grant the telecoms immunity, which is in itself constitutionally questionable. And really the only good way to kill the bill at this point is to kill it in the Senate with a filibuster. And Senator Obama is probably the most likely candidate to perform a filibuster in the Senate. There's actually a faction that has emerged in the last week within his own campaign urging him to vote no on telecom immunity. And DownsizeDC.org is basically gotten in touch with that faction of the Obama campaign, and clearly they don't really support either of the major candidates either, but this is one area where you can work with the Obama campaign to protect your civil liberties. So that's what they're asking you to do.
You know, I find this interesting because when Obama said he would support this I think it was last week, he said that he would support this. He said, because while the Bush administration might abuse this power, when I am president, I will keep a tight eye on it and really be scrutinizing it, and I won't abuse this power to spy on Americans without any kind of warrant, which is, I don't know how that gets by the Supreme Court. Where's the Fourth Amendment there? But when he's president, he'll watch out for him. Well, even if Obama was the perfect president, would this legislation still be in effect 4 years later, or 8 years later, or 10 years later? I mean, you see where I'm going here. This is granting a law that will go into effect, and now the government can spy on people with warrantless wiretapping with no recourse. And while Obama might really look into it, which I don't really trust in the first place, chances are there would be another president down the road that would abuse it. So. Yeah,
I mean, you really can't trust people to want to keep power for themselves, but they're saying they're only going to use it responsibly. And actually, Downsize DC's quote of the day that came with this message was from Alexander Hamilton. And he said, "A fondness for power is implanted in most men, and it's natural to abuse it once acquired." So even if Senator Obama intended to use the powers responsibly, it's too dangerous to let any president have those powers. And I think a lot of Obama supporters were expecting him to want to hand back a lot of these executive powers, and it was probably a misplaced hope. But what you should do at this point is get in touch with Senator Obama through DownsizeDC.org and let him know that you want this bill killed, and you don't think that any president should have this power, not even him. He might be a little bit too full of himself to think that he's above the temptation to use that kind of executive power.
Well, unfortunately, I think that Obama's been using the word change a lot, and people really like the word change because it's almost like a mirror. They see the change they want to see. He doesn't really get into specifics. So when he says change, well, what's that actually mean? So it's very much like looking into a mirror, and a lot of Obama supporters hear the word change and think of the change they want. But is it the change they're going to get? Seems so far we might get more of the same unless you do something about it. I know I did it easily. Log on to downsizedc.org, and it's just a few simple clicks from there. All right, when we come back, we are going to be talking more about war. We're going to be going into what's going on in Iran. I know we've been talking about this for years, but the war drums still are beating. We still are talking about going to war with Iran. We'll be talking about that when we come back.
Dave Ridley here from RidleyReport.com. Just wanted to urge Monadnock area viewers, please take Free Minds TV in moderation. You don't want your head to get loose and go floating around.
And welcome back to Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. With you today is Toby.
And Nick.
All right, we talked in the first segment about war with Iraq, where we are presently, have been for many years, probably will be for many more. Unfortunately, it seems almost like the government doesn't really want to get us out. Well, Do they want to get us into more wars? We've heard some of the presidential candidates talking about more wars. There will be more and more wars in this fight against terror. Where will it end? We've talked extensively about the possibilities of war with Iran. Nick, what's the latest?
There was a resolution introduced into the U.S. House of Representatives in early June, June 2nd, and it has since gained 19 co-sponsors. Unfortunately, it appears that it's going to progress and actually be voted on sometime within the next week, most likely after the 4th of July holiday, because Congress clearly takes that off themselves. Resolution 362 has actually, since the time it was introduced with 19 co-sponsors. Since it was introduced, it has gained 170 co-sponsors, which is nearly 40% of the House has their name on the bill as a sponsor. And House leadership has said the resolution is going to pass, to quote them, like a hot knife through butter. So, the way it's been scheduled, there's only 20 minutes of debate time at a maximum, which means the bill is assumed to pass by a 2/3 majority and that it is non-controversial. The key section of the bill that viewers should be aware of, and I'll quote directly from it. It demands that the president initiate an international effort to immediately and dramatically increase the economic, political, and diplomatic pressure on Iran to verifiably suspend its nuclear enrichment activities by prohibiting the export to Iran of all refined petroleum products, imposing stringent inspection requirements on all persons, vehicles, ships, planes, trains, and cargo either entering or departing Iran. That's from any of Iran's borders, so it's essentially a blockade. And prohibiting all international movement of all Iranian officials not involved in negotiating the suspension of Iran's nuclear program. So what you're talking about, this is an act of war.
Right. It might not be a gunshot as an act of war, but it basically is. You're cutting the country off. You're putting them... You're boxing them in a corner where there's nowhere left to go, really. Either give up or, which, I don't know, doesn't seem too likely. I've got an article we'll be getting into in a little bit about that. But we're boxing them into a corner where else do they have to go?
Well, nowhere, and that's the issue, is if you're forcing the country into a position where, in this case Iran, where it has to fire a shot to function as a nation, you are essentially the aggressor, and under what's considered the international rules of war, what's been observed for centuries, to prohibit a country's officials from traveling abroad and to block off all trade with that country.
I mean, imagine if we got all our trade blocked off today. We would be in an immediate depression. People would be out of work. People would be starving. There would be mass chaos if that happened to us in the United States. Imagine if you were living somewhere and you worked at a grocery store and you could no longer import any food. You drive a truck and you can no longer put any gas in it. You can't get to work. This is going to, the people in Iran are going to be supporting Iran in this case. This isn't a way to win the hearts and minds of the people. We've been told that this is a war for the minds, to change minds, to make people see that terrorism is bad and all that stuff. But is this going to change the minds, or is this going to make them really pissed off at the rest of the world?
Right, and speaking from the government's perspective, this isn't a complete embargo. Trade would still be allowed as long as it's not refined petroleum products or a number of other products.
Oh,
I believe
okay. So they're not.
But there would be forced inspections.
Okay. So it's not an all-out stop the trade?
No, it's not completely, but it is cutting off their supply of gasoline, which, believe it or not, they do import gasoline. So it's essentially an act of war, and it's setting the groundwork for that. And it should be noted that Iran's nuclear program, while the United States may be suspicious of it, there's been no verification that it's actually illegal. Iran has signed on to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which states that countries cannot pursue nuclear enrichment of radioactive materials for weapons purposes. But according to our national intelligence estimate and also the International Atomic Energy Agency, from the inspections that have been done, all that we can verify is that they're enriching uranium for peaceful purposes, which was the point of signing on to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. The idea was that countries would be allowed the right to explore nuclear energy, if they agreed not to build nuclear weapons. So essentially, they're following the terms of the treaty in as much as we know, and we're threatening to commit an act of war against them because we don't like them exercising their powers under that treaty.
Well, we are boxing them in a corner, and I don't think that they're going to back down. At least they're saying they're not going to. This coming from the AP, it turns out that their government is planning to dig 320,000 mass graves, reportedly to bury any enemies of war who invade their country. They are supposedly they have plans to dig 15 to 20,000 graves in each of the border provinces for a total of 320,000 graves, some of them mass graves if necessary. So at least they're saying in response to this, a lot of this coming in response to this, this new news item, is that we're not going to be backing down. So I know we've been talking about that there could be a war in Iraq, in Iran. I hope that it doesn't happen. I know that the public's support is not for it. The public is saying to win the hearts and minds, use talk to them, because we don't do all that much talking to them. Use a little bit of talking and do something else. But the politicians, I don't know, they don't really seem to follow suit. So we will see. We will be continuing to report this. Was there anything else in the article that was important to report right now?
No, not really. I mean, it's expected that this will be voted on very soon. So, I would encourage people to contact the representatives. But to be perfectly honest, it sounds like there's not much hope of actually defeating the measure. Hopefully we can avoid a war, and it would probably be worth it to contact your representative, let them know that you don't support them voting for this. But as far as trying to get the bill killed, it's a resolution actually, so it's urging the president to take these actions. But as far as actually killing the resolution, it seems unlikely. So you can try your best, but it might be better to focus on something like the FISA bill, where there's actually a chance of killing that, and just hope for the best with Iran.
All right. When we come back, we are going to be talking about Social Security. I know I got my letter in the mail recently saying how much I've given to Social Security, what my benefits would be, say if I got injured now, what I'd get from the government. We're going to be talking about why it's pretty much a scam on the American people. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Log on to freemindstv.com for archives of the show,
the Free Minds Radio podcasts,
show content and the forum,
ways to donate,
the members section,
contact info, and a whole lot more, all at freemindstv.com.
And welcome back to Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. With you today is Toby.
And Nick.
All right. I recently got my Social Security statement in the mail saying how much I have been paying into Social Security. You know, it's 7.5% from me, 7.5% from my employer. I've been paying in since I worked. I think I started working when I was 12 or 13 years old. Whenever it was, as soon as I was legal to work, I started working. And while I didn't make too much the first couple of years, since then, and I haven't made too much since then either, I'm still getting off on the career, starting to make money. I haven't been paying in for too many years, been paying in for about 10 years. I was looking at how much I actually have paid in over those years, and I was like, wow, I'm never going to see any of this money, because by the time I'm ready to retire, there's going to be nothing left. I mean, there's probably not going to be anything left in Social Security in the next 10 years, let alone in the next, when would I be able to retire in the next 40 years? There's going to be absolutely nothing there. So I'm paying all this money in for Social Security that I'm never going to see. What could I have done with it? Well, I could have no student loans right now. I could have paid for all of my college instead of taking out student loans. Then instead of paying back my student loans right now, I could be investing that money into an account that I could actually see, that I could actually retire with someday. Instead of paying off any credit card balances, I could have bought those items outright. And this is only the money that I put in, not including what my employer put in. We put in 7.5%, and then the employer has to match that 7.5%. So I don't know, some of the employers might have just kept that for themselves, but some of the employers might have gave me a little bit of that money, and I could have even more money to be investing and actually have some savings in a retirement fund. But instead I'm giving it to the government every year for money I'm never going to see. Now let's say well, Toby, what if you get hurt? You might need the money tomorrow. You might be out of work forever. You might get disabled. You might need that money. Yeah, I'm going to need $750, I think it was something like that, a month to live off of. I'm going to have to do something else. I can't live off $750 a month. I don't know about you guys out there. I don't think it's possible. Maybe living on the streets, but where are they going to send my Social Security check to? So that's pretty much pointless. If I got disabled, I'd have to figure something out. I'd have to find some kind of a work, which of course would cut off my Social Security benefits for the most part. So it's really pointless. I don't know why I'm paying this money in. I think that my life would be much better. No debt, instead savings, real money to retire on someday, money that's growing instead of nothing that I'm never going to see. I don't want to know what the rest of people think out there. What do people think? Should we be paying Social Security? Should it be forced upon us? Should we be able to opt right out of it? I know I've heard of some people who say they can opt out of it. Right now, I don't think my employer would really allow me to opt out of it. They don't. I know. I'd like to work for someone who was all pro-liberty, saying opt out of the Social Security, but right now, I'm kind of forced into the box. So it seems forced upon me to put this money in that I'm never going to see. I want to know what the rest of the people think out there. Is this worthwhile to be paying in Social Security that you're never going to see? And I really want to hear from someone who actually thinks they're going to see the Social Security. I know some of the people who are on the brink of retirement may see the Social Security benefits, but what about younger workers? Are they ever going to see anything for this? I don't know. Send us your emails, fmtv@freemindstv.com. You can also leave us a voicemail on our talkback line, 206-350-0123. Let us know what you think. Really about anything. I really want to know what people think about Social Security. I think it's a scam on the American people. I think it's a waste of money. Tell me what you think. What do you think, Nick?
Well, obviously, most of the money's been spent. If the government had actually kept the money in an account for you and just let it sit even in a savings account, the money would be there. But they didn't. They spent it. And currently, what current young workers are doing, or anybody who's currently working and paying Social Security, is they're paying for current retirees and people who are drawing, unemployment or injury benefits out of Social Security. So you're paying for the current retirees and benefactors from the system, and that money's not being saved. It's being spent right out, and it clearly is a scam. I mean, if any private company had arranged a retirement system like this, people would be in prison for it. But the government did it, so likely, they're just going to either increase taxes or cut the benefits or let inflation take care of the rest. So you might
that money's worthless. You might get the money that they're promised, but you can't pay rent or buy food with it.
Right, and you might get $750 in 40 years, but at that point, $750 might only pay your electric bill and your phone bill. I mean, quite honestly, if you look at inflation over the last 40 years and even just carry it out at an even pace, $750 or whatever your benefits are expected to be, they're not going to buy very much.
Right. Well, let us know what you think. We're running out of time for this show, but we want to know what you think. Send us an email, fmtv@freemindstv.com, or leave us a line on our talkback line, 206-350-0123. Also, it's a new month, so give us a vote at podcastalley.com. That way you can just go to vote.freemindstv.com. Visit us online for archives of the show, Free Minds Radio. We will be live this Sunday from 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Check out the show, Free Minds Radio, very similar, but a little bit longer than Free Minds TV. It has been Toby here with you.
And Nick.
Take it easy.